a couple days ago, Denis Villeneuve was on a podcast and he was asked about directing a Star Wars movie, and he gave an answer that got the internet talking. And a bunch of people started asking me about it, so I wanted to walk through everything that he said about Star Wars and whether he would direct a film. But this is one of these things that we kind of do in the modern era of big, gigantic franchises. We're constantly fan casting characters and fan casting directors. And generally speaking, what we do is, you know who would be great for a Star Wars movie? Christopher Nolan. You know who would be great for an Avengers movie? Christopher Nolan. You know who could do a sci-fi movie really well? What if we got the guy that did Dune to do a Star Wars movie? It's kind of like this, the biggest names, the most popular names, or the most obvious one-to-one comparisons. So it was inevitable that someone would finally ask Denis Villeneuve, the guy that did Dune, about Star Wars. Star Wars, heavily inspired by Dune, a lot of parallels there. Finally got asked about it. Here is what he had to say. So he starts off talking about his thoughts on the first two movies, and it says, I was the target audience. I was 10 years old. It went to my brain like a silver bullet. I became obsessed with Star Wars. I mean, The Empire Strikes Back is the movie that I anticipated the most in my life. I saw the movie a billion times on screen. I was traumatized by The Empire Strikes Back. I adore Star Wars. So, like so many of us, just absolutely love the first two movies. And this is pretty common. This is my brother-in-law's story that, you know, he's the perfect age when the first two movies came out. And then you get Return of the Jedi. And those people that were the perfect age, they're 10 years old when the first one came out, have a very different opinion when the third one comes out. The problem is that it all derailed in 1983 with Return of the Jedi. It's a long story. I was 15 years old, and my best friend and I wanted to take a cab and go to LA and talk to George Lucas. We were so angry. Still, today, the Ewoks. It turned out to be a comedy for kids. That being the key little line there. His take was, Star Wars went from being this adventure that I enjoyed as a kid to turned out to be a comedy for kids. This is a story I've heard many times before. This is almost exactly what my brother-in-law has said about Star Wars, that it was great, and then the Ewoks showed up, and it got so silly, and it completely lost him. Denny, being around the same age as him, same exact story. Loved the first two, and then the third one, it's a comedy for kids. Now, I've kind of a lot to say about this. I'm that next generation, 10, 15 years younger than them. So I grew up on the full trilogy. There was no surprise. There's Ewoks. I always grew up on it. So I never had any problems with the Ewoks. And I think there's been a perpetual disconnect a little bit between George Lucas's thoughts on Star Wars and the fandom's thoughts on Star Wars, where George Lucas thinks I've always been making movies for 11 and 12-year-olds.
One of the reasons why I made Star Wars is it's made for 12-year-olds. It appeals to everybody, but it was still made for 12-year-olds.
And we were all 12 once.
And you watch the first Star Wars, and you've got these two cute robots bickering with each other. Lots of silly humor in that. And Yoda, a lot of what he says, it's a Muppet cracking jokes, talking in a funny manner. And then the third one, you get Ewoks. The fourth one, you get Jar Jar Binks. There's always been the comedic side characters. It's always been there. And maybe the formula was a little bit off with Ewoks and Jar Jar, but there's always been this flavor of comedy for 11 and 12-year-olds. So if you were the right age when the first one came out, and then you're older when the next one comes out, you age out of it, and suddenly you see the childishness. So for Denny, brother-in-law, they saw it with the Ewoks. For me, my generation, it was Jar Jar. We're like, what happened here? What's this Jar Jar doing here? And you see that pattern a little bit of the older generations not like connecting with the newer Star Wars. Pretty common little story that's played out many times before. And I don't mean to entirely be dismissive of the faults of Return of the Jedi. I think there are things in there that make it clearly weaker than the first two films. There's reasons that someone would feel that way besides just aging out of the target audience. And that's not just, like I said, could the formula be off where there is too much silliness? There's too big of a gap towards cute teddy bears. I get it. But I do think there's a little bit of he's making movies for, as Denis said himself, the problem is, where's the one right before that? He says with the first movie, I was the target audience. So by the time you get to the next one, or 2 movies later, 6 years later, he's starting to age out of it. He's starting to see the juvenile side to it. So, I think there is some truth to that. Real quick, I wanted to say this. Right now for Black Friday, I'm doing 43% off of Patreon if you sign up for an annual membership. Yesterday was my 43rd birthday, so we're doing 43% off. That is annual memberships. That's through Monday. I'll have more details kind of at the end of this, but if you like my channel, want more content, want to support my channel, want to say happy birthday to me, consider signing up for one of those annual memberships of Patreon at the link down below in the description. Kind of gives his quick little thoughts on would he want to do his own Star Wars movie. And he says, Star Wars became crystallized in its own mythology, very dogmatic. It seemed like a recipe, no more surprises. So I'm not dreaming to do a Star Wars because it feels like code is very codified. So, kind of 2 things in there. First off, he's like, I love Star Wars. I fell out of love with it during the first batch of people that fell out of love with it. Return of the Jedi, I was out. You lost me, teddy bears. And it apparently never got him back. So why does he not want to do one? It's just lost him. But the other side in there, and I think this is the one that's a little bit more universal as to why they're always probably going to struggle to get actual visionary directors at this point in time, actual visionary storytellers, screenwriters, not just people that maybe they're good, but they go from studio to studio. They're taking whatever job they can get. You can hire a good person that does that, but it's crystallized. If you're a visionary storyteller, director, screenwriter, you want to bring your own ideas to the table. You want to build out a mythology. What you don't want to do is jump into a 45-year-old hardened mythology. And I think that's also so much of why Disney's Star Wars has struggled so hard to make something that is universally appealing, because they need to be able to tell their own stories. But as soon as you get rid of the EU, extended universe, the books that were in place for 25 years, as soon as you do that, you anger a group of people. If you lean too far into that, you alienate a group of people. And then we want to do shows for people that like the nostalgia, so you get mocked for doing nostalgia. If you want to do something new and experimental, different, you get mocked for that. Like it's so difficult to find the right space to tell a Star Wars story when you have such a codified mythology, fans that have such very distinct things that they want out of Star Wars, and there's some overlap, and there's a lot of very different desires and expectations of Star Wars. What is the benefit for him stepping into that, where everything, the mythology, the look, the feel, it's already crystallized? What can he bring to the table besides, like he can bring technical proficiency. He'll have a great production that'll look fantastic. And he could tell a story that will have all the right beats in place. But what fresh new ideas can he bring to it? There's just not much that you can do when you're working for Mickey Mouse, and it's already so hard in its mythology. And so if you look at the movies that he's done pretty much the last decade, ever since Arrival, it's 3 sequels or 2 sequels and an adaptation. So it's not that he's opposed to franchises. It's not that he has to have his entirely new thing, but he needs a space where he can actually build out his vision for it and what that looks like and the changes that he would make and adapt it into the film format or bring it into the 21st century with Blade Runner. He can work in a franchise. That's literally all he's done since after Arrival. But what he doesn't want to do is jump into something like Star Wars, where it's just so established that what can he do? Even the language that he uses, I think, is actually really good language to describe it. It's a recipe. I talk a lot about how some of these studios, Marvel, turns these visionary directors into McDonald's managers, or you could say it, a chef at Chili's. That's what he's describing. Like, maybe you're a really good chef, but the menu is established by the franchise. It's determined by what's come before. Everybody else has determined what Star Wars is, what Marvel is. So you bring in a director and you go, here's the recipe. Make this menu, make this recipe. They can cook it really well. They'll do a good job. Your steak will be perfect, medium rare, but it is seasoned exactly how they're told to season it. Everything is exactly what they're told to do. And that would be bringing this visionary director in, Denis, to do a Star Wars movie or Marvel or whatever else. Why would he want to do that? Where even if he goes over to Warner Brothers and does Dune, he has so much more room to put his flavor into it, his cooking style into it, his cinematic magic, not copying what came from the past. And Star Wars in particular is in this place where they're really struggling with, they don't know how to do new things. Anything new they do is just mashes on feet. And so the one trick they have that's worked pretty well for them is looking backwards and nostalgia and referencing in the member berries and, hey, look who it is. Why would Denis want anything to do with that? So that is my quick thoughts on what he has to say about it. It makes perfect sense to me. Both his childhood experience, that's literally almost exactly what my brother-in-law said. The Ewoks killed it for me, and I haven't taken it seriously since then. And then Denis and directing stuff. Why would a visionary director want to be a McDonald's manager for Mickey Mouse? Why would he want to be a Chili's chef for Mickey Mouse? I like Chili's. I don't mind my kids go to McDonald's. I don't mind McDonald's, but that's not visionary cooking right there. That's not a master chef sort of deal. That's a menu. That's a recipe that no matter how talented the cook is, it's still just a Chili's steak. Still just a Big Mac. Their visionary elements don't play into it at all. Totally get it. Hey, if you like my channel and want to support it on a deeper level, if you like a lot of the clips that are on the second channel, not this one, I shot this one separately, consider joining over on Patreon. This weekend for my birthday, which was yesterday, and Black Friday, I'm doing a massive sale. It was my 43rd birthday, so I'm doing 43% off if you sign up for an annual membership for Patreon. That is by far the biggest sale I've ever done. Normally the sale is under 20%. This is over 40%, and that's only through Monday. So if you like my channel, if you thought about joining Patreon, this is literally the best time to ever have done it because I've never done a sale over 20% before. So it was my birthday. I thought, what's a fun thing for my birthday? You get my number of years off of a subscription at the annual level. That's the weekly live streams. At the middle tier, your name on my end card, and at the top tier, a 30-minute video chat with me each month. You're a member at that, and if you sign up for the annual, get that discount. That's 12. That's 6 hours of talking to me in 2025. There you go. Have it. The information is down below in the comment section. What do you think about Denis and all of this? And keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.